Okay, so I'm back, and my neighbor lost his gas, and he wanted to know if I still have mine. So, where was I? Yeah. First, I rewatched my first 15 minutes, and you want to make clear why I chose to go with a functional medicine doctor. What I was saying is that I had to expand my repertoire of practitioners because there was no point in me seeking to optimize my mental health through my conventional GP. Because when I present a conventional medical doctor, sorry, I just can't get comfortable with that. With what I'm trying to do, they don't understand, they don't register it. What do I mean by that? It's like if I go in and I say, I have these episodes or these periods of time where I have low energy, they automatically go, that's depression. And then if I say, then I have, oh yes, that's your bipolar disorder. I see in your chart that you have bipolar disorder. Would you like some help with your bipolar disorder? Okay, so let's say that I want help again, knowing what a tragic mistake that was in the past. Let's say that I submit to that and I want help. Well, what's your help? Oh, here's some more medication. No, I don't want medication. What else do you have? You see where it goes? And then I become, once again, non-compliant, and it completely colors the entire interaction that I have. I mean, I literally, it does color the entire interaction that I have. So I had to go outside the clinic and employ another person with a different training and background and perspective. And I feel that she listens. I said in a previous video that, almost never in my life had I sat down with a doctor of any kind, psychiatrist or otherwise, and had more than like a 30-minute conversation where everything was discussed. My medical history was discussed. That happened when I went to Index Health. And so I have finally seen that a doctor can have a sustained attention span and does value historical data. I hadn't seen that in the conventional medical system. So I'm just throwing that out there. Now, the point I was trying to make before I was interrupted is that my distress at the proliferation of the ketogenic diet as a solution to bipolar disorder and other mental illnesses is that it's going to make it appear that mental illness all along has been mitochondrial dysfunction or metabolic dysfunction. So it's a reframing of mental illness that throws the mental illness back onto the biological model. After years of trying to bring practitioners to a place where they could entertain the biopsychosocial model so that people with different lived experiences can help them understand how they might have been fucked up by those experiences. I mean, in my opinion, that's basically as simple as that there's such a thing as damage, such a thing as injury, such a thing as bad parenting, such a thing as trauma, such a thing as abuse, such a thing as stress, such a thing as overwhelm, such a thing as isolation, such a thing as loneliness, such a thing as poverty, right? And that you can have been served up through the damage to the mental illness category, let's say that so we were trying to talk them out of a strictly biological materialist model for decades, and now it seems that, to my mind at least, framing mental illnesses as metabolic disorders will throw us right back into the biological model. So you know, whatever works for people is much better than whatever makes me happy as a psychiatric survivor. But I raise these points because I see some things happening already. And so first of all, let's talk about why the ketogenic diet is being even entertained or studied as a solution. And that is because it was first developed to treat epilepsy, and a lot of the medications that are used to treat bipolar disorder are being used off-label, and they're off-label because they were approved to treat epilepsy. So the psychiatric community has a long history of doing this, treating non-neurological disorders with medications and things designed for epilepsy. So this didn't surprise me. It didn't surprise me that this was where we were going to go. As soon as I learned that about the ketogenic diet, I knew that it would only be a matter of time before it was being pushed onto bipolar people. So, or people with manias and depressions, as I like to say. So, that didn't surprise me, and some of my questions and reservations might later just appear to be sheer ignorance, because I am ordering books like Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind by Georgia Ede and Chris Palmer's Brain Energy, and I will faithfully sit down and read them. I really will. I will give the science a review that it truly warrants. But before I do that, I want to put this stuff on record. Why I do not wish to try this diet, and why I kind of just wish it would go away. I mean, that's bad. I want people to be as medication-free and happy as they possibly can, so I don't really wish it would go away, but for me, it creates this tension in my mind because I want to be doing everything that I possibly can in my power to be medication-free and symptom-free. And if there's something out there that people think is really the holy grail, and I just find it, then that makes me feel irresponsible. And it doesn't just make me feel like I'm at risk of appearing irresponsible. It makes me literally have conversations with myself wherein I'm like, well, if you really wanted to, you could do it. And then I watch it like a what I eat in a day video, and I'm like, I don't think I can. I mean, so for me personally, there are a few, I'll say, purely subjective, petty reasons why I was not attracted to this diet. One is that I do not tolerate dairy well. Don't tolerate dairy well at all. I wish that I never really had dairy in my diet. I grew up drinking milk. It complicated a lot of sinus problems and chronic sinus infections. In my early 20s, I tried the vegan macrobiotic diet for about a year and a half, and I believe that is what tipped me over into being just allergic to or sensitive to dairy, into being more or less full-blown lactose intolerant, where now I have gastric distress. You know it. If you don't have it, you know someone who does. So I'm going to get into the gross details, but it's not good. And every time I watch a video about eating keto or look up keto recipes, it's things are drowning in cheese. I mean, people are using cheese as bread, like roll-ups, like tortillas made of cheese. I can't do that. So now the diet becomes even more restrictive, and a lot of people are like, what's the big deal? I mean, I know somebody who was vegetarian and did keto for weight loss, and she loved it. Hoo-ha, hoorah. Now, so there's that. I don't like the idea of making my life so much more complicated. I don't like the idea of it minimizing my protein intake. You could argue that I favor another camp of people who overconsume a macronutrient and fetishize a macronutrient just as much as the ketoers fetishize and overconsume fat, and that I like do that with protein. I will accept that argument, but I don't find even the way that people eat in preparation for a bodybuilding competition to be as extreme reliant and on protein and exclusive of carbs and fat. Like, I just don't see it as being that extreme. They don't they don't eliminate it or shrink it down to the size of like 5%. Like, it's wow. Okay, so I'm afraid of losing muscle mass. I'm afraid that that level of fat might make me feel nauseous. Other reason is that there is somebody in my family who has been on keto for years, and this person is like a religious fanatic about it. She won't stop promoting it to me. We spend a lot of our conversational time talking about it, even though I haven't expressed an interest, and I feel that it's a bizarre sort of proselytizing that she's doing, and it irritates me to no end. And so for that reason, and then she got it in her head that this was a good treatment for my bipolar disorder, and it's really insane right now. I mean, the level of it. So yeah, there's that. That's not a good reason to not do something if it's advantageous, but there is that emotional factor at play. I don't like it. I don't like the way that people are. It feels like I was proselytized to by religious, actual evangelical Christians years ago, and it feels like the same thing. I mean, so there's that. Other objections are more scientifically based, so I want answers to these questions. So both taking of medication and this diet are both extreme to me. So it's being framed as the wonderful alternative to medication where you just use food, and I think that actually obscures or conceals some of the risks, because compared to taking, say, lithium salts or antipsychotics or introducing things exogenous to the body, a diet seems less harsh, less of an intervention, but is it really? I think it's somewhat being misrepresented as less extreme than taking meds, and in my opinion, we should be skeptical and cautious around that. The questions I have about the efficacy of the diet are this. I've learned about autophagy and mitophagy. I have learned that fasting induces this state of sort of like the body going in and power washing itself, like removing defective, detritus type rogue cells, things that are not functioning, things that need to be recycled, that it does not do this unless it's given the opportunity and the stimulus to do so, which is being deprived of food or fasting. So the ketogenic diet, by lowering the carbohydrate intake to the point where there's not enough glucose circulating, that the body has to turn on a backup or alternative system of generating energy through the breakdown of fats into ketone bodies. It sounds like something that's underutilized in our present culture. I will grant that. We don't fast. We stuff ourselves all day. We eat constantly. We graze. we have really wildly biologically disharmonious lives. You know, everything is not natural. Now, I'm going to make another video where I talk about how the word natural in health is really an unhelpful. There's no such thing as natural. Okay, it's a construct. So anyway, I will grant that, and I will grant that there is a documented scientific process phenomenon at work in autophagy or mitophagy. But I don't, I guess, understand how we got from this is a process the body needs to do regularly that's being neglected by modern Western people to let's live constantly in a state of low blood sugar. I don't know how we got, except to say that that is our modern culture. This is part of our modern. If something works, let's do it all the time, and then it'll work all the time. You know, if something is helpful, let's do it constantly. You know, this constant, more is always better, everything taken to the extreme, this competitive lifestyle bullshit, frankly. The lifestyle stylings that go on online. But my question is, okay, so if mitophagy and autophagy, either through fasting or through the ketogenic diet, is like your body power washing itself, what, I know it's a crude analogy, but what would happen to your house if you continuously power washed it all day, every day? Sooner or later, there would be no siding left on your house. Do you see my point? I'm just wondering, and because I can't find a lot of bad press on it right now. I can't find a lot to back me up, but this is my initial intuitive analysis. As a person who is a non-medical professional, who used to be a personal trainer and had 2 semesters of A&P in college, bear that in mind, okay? I'm just saying, this is my thought process. Now, both are extreme. Both the medications and this diet are extreme. Both were originally created for epilepsy, at least the medications that I took as a bipolar patient. The medications I took were hard on the kidneys and the liver. And guess what? The ketogenic diet is also hard on your kidneys and your liver. Imagine that. So, kidney stones are something that I dealt with in college. They were very painful. I wouldn't want to have them again. There's controversy and debate over having high cholesterol on the diet, whether or not that's really dangerous. But when you are flooding your system with fat as a primary micronutrient in your diet, some of your organs have a hard time. I don't know why this is so hard for people to accept, but when it makes your breath smell, it makes you constipated, it should give you pause. I think that the medical system in our country emphasizes digestive health and cardiovascular health, and most of us, unless you really make a point of it, most people have no idea what their kidneys, their spleen, their liver actually do, where they are, why it's important to keep them, how to keep them healthy. We just kind of like take certain organs and systems in our culture for granted that are not taken for granted in other cultures and medical systems. I'll just say that. Now, the other reservations I have about the ketogenic diet are that these phenomenal remission results are still very much short term. People will claim that they have 100 years of data on the diet, but that's because over 100 years ago is when it was first inflicted on epileptics. And prior to it being inflicted on them, fasting was. They were withholding food from epileptic children in order to make them stop seizing, and a doctor came up with a way to feed them that would, again, mimic the fasting. So then this gets us to my main question and concern about the ketogenic diet. One of the things that I learned from listening to Dr. Peter Ghosh talk about psychiatric medications is that the psychiatric medications that I was on worked to contain and prevent mania in my brain by shutting down parts of my brain. So the parts of my brain that would become overactive in mania couldn't do that anymore because these medications were making them stop functioning as well. Which I would say was something that I felt to be true intuitively from my experience of taking them and my feelings of sedation, lethargy, just generally having the brakes put on. But it's weird because the brain, you can do that. You can shut down whole parts of your brain. We don't use it actively all the time. It's so fascinating to me, the possibilities in this one organ and how it works. So my sense of the ketogenic diet that nobody's talking about very much is that these people have such low blood sugar. Now, the brain is the number one consumer of glucose in your body. It's 2% of your body by volume, and it consumes 20% of your glucose. So it's taking up the blood sugar and using it. It's a huge user of blood sugar, glucose, okay? So when you take that away from the brain, why would it work as well? And this is the mysterious thing from the testimonials. I suspect that these people's brains won't produce hallucinations, mood swings, because they're not active enough to do it. They don't have enough energy. You've choked it out enough that it's not capable of that level of activity. So they would say, no, you don't understand. And I mean, I'm getting this really eerie sense from listening to people talk about, I feel great. I feel really like I have so much more energy. The mental clarity. You hear people talk about that with fasting. When something happens when your body thinks it's dying. Let me repeat that. Something happens when your body thinks it's dying, and your body thinks it's in the initial phases of starvation through this diet and through fasting, because what it registers as fuel is not present anymore. So, it reminds me of stories I've heard about people who have a near-death experience through hypothermia or who almost freeze to death. Eventually, your body does everything it can to keep you warm. And when it figures out that it's lost the battle, when a critical threshold has been crossed and there's no longer a way to sustain body temperature through shivering and whatnot, you will get the most euphoric experiences. People don't feel cold. People who freeze to death have been found without their clothes on because they have this weird inverted nerve ending. They feel like they're burning up. But it's basically a malfunction. It's a misperception. And I'm not saying it's that severe with the keto people, but it could be. It could just be that your brain thinks that it's starving and it's going to try to make it as easy for you to, it's going to make the process, the transition out of life, as pleasant as possible for you. It could be that we misinterpret. Like, I tried fasting for a day and I got a headache and it hurt like hell, and I was really angry that even after I started consuming food again, it didn't go away for another day. I'm not really impressed with this low blood sugar stuff. I'm not impressed enough to make myself go into ketosis. It's frightening to me that you can develop this sort of fruity bad breath that used to be a warning sign when we were being taught about how to aid a person in the throes of a diabetic episode. I'm saying, why does everything get reframed as this? Because it's now being linked to healing of illnesses that I will get into. Like, I just don't understand. I just don't understand the rush to an extreme solution. But I shouldn't be surprised, because medications themselves are the same thing, a rush to an extreme solution. And of the two, I would much prefer that people try the ketogenic diet over medication, to taper off medication, or as an alternative first resort to medication. But I'm saying that the distinctions between these two solutions are not as meaningful to me as they seem to be for so many other people. Now, so I'm concerned about this euphoria, clarity, energy. I'm concerned that it's sort of a dishonest discourse, in other words. I want to know what is actually going on in these people's brains. The other thing about it is that just as medications were framed as a lifelong solution to a chronic condition, so too has the ketogenic diet been framed as a lifestyle as opposed to a short-term intervention diet. The difference between a diet and a lifestyle is that eventually people stop dieting. And what we know about diets and diet culture are that we're not very much successful with them, and they're not actually creating health. They're just not. But the keto people want to become acolytes and adherents, and it is kind of cult-like, because I get concerned, and I understand why it happens. For instance, my relative that I told you about, the proselytizer, her husband had a heart attack. He had been living with her, not doing the ketogenic diet. Now, he had been like a typical standard American diet, midlife, pot-bellied, out of shape, smoker, typical southern white male, right? Then he had a heart attack. Then he did keto, and he lost like 65 pounds, and he came off all of his heart attack meds and his cholesterol and all of his lipid profile. Like, the whole miraculous story. But that's cool. That's great. We must never assume that just because something works in the short term that it can't have long-term risks, that it doesn't care. I mean, like I said, why would you stay in power washing mode all the time? That seems rather risky to me. Once these people lose the weight, they assume that it's the solution of life. So they won't stop doing it, even after it stops working. And that to me is a dangerous experiment. So I just haven't seen a lot of data about large populations. The studies that are the most talked about in the social media influence spheres involve at most 30 to 50 people, most of whom, get this, most of them are treatment resistant. What does that mean? So to return to the effective treatment versus root cause and the faulty inference process that goes on with that. When you do a study on a group of adults who've been on psychiatric medications for 10 to 15 years and stopped responding to those medications, in the sense that they continue to take them and they continue to experience bad symptoms like hallucinations, delusions, mood swings, etc., depression. Okay? then at that point, we don't even know if we're dealing with the illness or if we're dealing with the tragic metabolic dysfunction derived from the medications that they've been consuming for 10 to 15 years. So we don't know if they're actually treating an illness or if they're just doing damage control to the damage that they've already done to these people. Furthermore, we don't have control groups. So I want to know of these 30 or 31 people, or 28 of whom responded really well to the ketogenic diet, and of those, let's say I had some significant portion were able to come completely off meds. We do not know what they would be like if we had tapered them off meds to begin with and just seen what was going on. Do you follow me? Furthermore, we don't have another control group where these same individuals were tapered off their meds in a safe and effective way and then put on a healthy, balanced diet with an exercise intervention. In other words, we don't have a non-medicated control group just to see how much of what these people are suffering from is over-medication to begin with. We don't have a control, what I would say is a common sense control group. All we have is the keto. So we don't know. We don't know. What the keto is competing against is the worst case scenario, and we just don't know. So that's some of why I feel like making these videos and putting them out now, because it's such a rigor to look at this stuff, look at this information with a framework of intellectual honesty as opposed to a framework of intellectual dishonesty, which always permeates discussions of mental health culture, mental illness, right? So my hot take is that I'm not going to try the ketogenic diet for myself because I think it's too risky, as well as not being very much fun or having any real culinary appeal to me. But I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous the way that it's being promoted, and I also think that I'm glad that it is, because it gives me an opportunity to discuss some of the real issues that I see going on in our culture that are feeding the discourse around mental illness. Later, I will do a video where I really lean heavily on Peter Gotch, and in his book, Mental Health Survival Kit, he makes these really bold statements, such as things like, do everything in your power to avoid getting a diagnosis. Sometimes I talk about my channel with my boyfriend, and he becomes very concerned because he thinks that I'm going to become like a target and that I can't say things and liability. He's just very cautious, and he's like, you can't say that. I'm like, well, let's see. Okay, he's afraid for me because of the power of the psychiatric industry and the psychoeducation campaigns, and just this sustained intellectual dishonesty that we all live under. Honestly, I would prefer that people do this if they're going to do anything at all, if they feel compelled to do it. I'm not trying to dissuade people from trying the ketogenic diet, but I do feel like somebody needs to sound the note of caution. I think that one thing that we fundamentally fail to understand, and that is not being injected into talk about the ketogenic diet, is that there's a large percentage of mentally ill people who are not mentally ill. That they've been put on medication for one reason or another and not had a very good time of it. And nobody's taking responsibility for the ill effects of that medication that they probably should never have been prescribed to begin with. And I will go more into detail about that. But this constant refrain from the media that is illogical and dishonest is that mental illness is on this rise, that it's like obesity and cancer and Alzheimer's and anything else. Chronic illness is exploding, and mental illness is no different. Mental illness is different. I can tell you that mental illness is different. I think that a large percentage of people who are psychiatric patients wouldn't be psychiatric patients if they'd never encountered a psychiatrist or a doctor who was going to facilitate an interaction with a psychiatrist, and that they would be leading happier, healthier lives. So people don't believe it, but in other cultures, the WHO has studied this. People have had acute psychiatric breakdowns, including psychosis. So people who would be diagnosed as schizophrenic, full-blown hallucinations, losing contact with reality, people have come out of such episodes and not had it recur without the help of medication. But that is a reality that you won't hear talked about very much in our culture, in our world. Okay? It's just something to think about. But it is one of the reasons why Robert Whitaker did what he did when he devoted his journalistic career to exposing the lies of the psychiatric industry. So I really hope that keto works for those people who feel desperate enough to try a solution like that, but not maybe not meds. I hope that works for people, and I hope it makes them healthier in the long run. What I will do for myself is refrain from doing that until I have an episode, and then I would consider it. Part of my issue with it too is that I would enjoy making an experiment of it, even as constrained as it would make my dietary choices. If I had a way to measure the efficacy well, because what I mean by that is I spend most of my time asymptomatic. I would say that I'm not different from other people who are classified as having bipolar disorder. Even people with severe manias and depressions still spend more than half of their time without either. So in other words, as a normal person experiencing normal life. So for me, things only get really bad every 3 to 4 years. And I would hate to think that I would do something that is detrimental to my body in an effort to, that I have to spend years, you know, it doesn't add up. Okay, just as the meds didn't add up anymore. So this is just something to think about. I am going to keep you posted. All right. Thank you very much for listening.